I'd like to welcome everybody to the Coaches in the Mouth pod. This is Coach Jeff Williams, along with Coach Bray Cook. This podcast is powered by Lindsay and Associates. Coach Cook, we got a great big guest again.
Yes, we do.
Again this week. Go ahead and introduce them, and let's get into it.
A Razorback legend, someone who has been in the program for a while now. Alyssa Orange, welcome to the show.
Thanks, guys. I'm really happy to be here. I'm excited to be here. I mean, I when I got here, you were still playing, so that tells you how long I've been here. So
it's a lot of Razorback football and basketball and baseball and all of it. So and I think that's what's exciting about having you here is what an incredible, I guess, lens into the program that not everybody gets to have. You've seen a lot of it.
It's been a really fun ride, and I got here in 2013. Signed a 3-year contract, if you're familiar kind of how TV works. Moved here from Abilene, Texas, where I got my first sports job. And was like, okay, I have a 3-year contract. I'm from the East Coast. I want to go back to the East Coast. And then I think everyone would understand that when you get here, there's something about it that keeps you here. So here I am, 12 years later, still here. So
what was it about this place that kept you here? Did you think it was going to be like a long-term spot for you?
No, I really wanted to go back, being in TV at that point, being young in my 20s. It's you want to climb up the ladder, like Charlotte, Baltimore, DC, like those were some markets that I thought about going to next because I was from Virginia. And, you get here and you realize how unique of a job it was started at Razorback Nation and then it turned into Pig Trail Nation. How unique of a job that is for a local television sports department and how invested they are in specifically just covering the Razorbacks. I'd be lying if I said, I also met my husband. So he's from here. He's a Fayetteville guy. And so he was a big part of that as well. But I think with us both being in kind of that world, he was in radio, I was in TV. We had gotten married. Quickly had our son. And so we realized that this was a place where we could do some really cool things individually and together. And we had family support here. And you take all of that away and it's a beautiful place to live. I love being up here. I love going outdoors and hiking and all that kind of stuff. And so it checked off all of these boxes where you start to realize that just because a market feels bigger in a TV scheme, it doesn't mean you're doing what we're doing here. We were so unique. And each step of the way, I had an opportunity to grow the product and change things around, and my role increased. And it was one of those things where I wasn't ready to walk away from these things that we were doing quite yet.
Yeah. Well, and we were talking, before you got here about just the different head coaches that you've covered, the different athletes, and what's it like, I guess, the transition through these different head coaches and through these different things and just being there throughout the whole time. The change that I guess.
And the personalities.
Sure.
I mean, the personalities, because all of them are different.
Right. It was. And so I got here. My first football season was also Coach Bielema's first football season. So that's how I like to mark myself. I was here when B started. And I loved covering him. He was great to us. He was, and back then we got to talk to everybody. You got put into that scrum room and everyone's throwing cameras in your face and you're always talking, but we were also talking to the assistants, and that's how we got to have really good relationships with Sam Pittman and some of the other coaches that we were covering. And that's what I love the most is that they were so accessible and we were able to talk to them, and you grow those relationships with these coaches. And then you go over to basketball, and Mike Anderson might be the nicest guy you've ever covered, ever. And he just was so welcoming and really, really nice and available. And you got to get to know him, and obviously Matt Zimmerman and his staff. And that was really fun. And then Dave is great, and Dave's been really fun, and everyone has their own personalities, right? Like Bielema was very over the top and energetic, and Mike Anderson he had fun, but he was like very, he was Mike. He was kind of a little old school. He did all these things, and like Dave's a baseball coach. I grew up playing softball. Like Dave's a baseball coach, and he's like matter of fact, tell you like it is. Like this is baseball. Like this is how things go, and it's fun to see the coaches taking on the personalities of their sports too. Like that makes sense. But then you also grow really close relationships to like the track coaches. Like when I left, before I made the announcement public, I texted Chris Bucknam and I told him how much I enjoyed covering the track team and his program and just how wonderful and welcoming he was. I mean, anytime we wanted to do anything, he was like, come on over, come see us. Mike Neighbors has been the same way. So even those coaches of those smaller sports, to just have that opportunity to talk to them and grow relationships with them, it's been really fun. I think the hard thing right now, and we can get into it later, is just obviously things changed after COVID. So we're not seeing people face to face as much as we used to, which obviously impacts the relationships that you're building with these people. But I have had the opportunity to cover some really great coaches. There were some, I don't think we need to mention, there was a 2-year span during football that wasn't that great. It's had its ups and downs for sure. But it has been really fun to get to know these guys. And then when Sam came back, like I think it was day 3, him and Jamie were at a basketball game, and I wasn't at the opening press conference when he got introduced because Tara and I were in New York City covering Darren McFadden's college football Hall of Fame induction ceremony. So we weren't there. And so day 3, we had gotten back into town, and I saw him at a basketball game, and he just immediately gave me a hug and was like, hey girl, how are you? Like, it's great to see you. You know, and I was like, I'm so excited that you're back. But like, he'd been gone, like 4 years or something, and 5 years. But that's the relationship that we built while he was here, when he would come in as the O-line coach and sit down at the chair, take his shoes and socks off and say, all right, guys, what you got for me today? Yep. So it was really cool. Those kind of relationships are special.
Well, talk to us a little bit about this. You know, you talked about growing up in Virginia and you went to Florida State. You know, getting into sports media and that part, obviously you've got an athletic background. What drove you to get into this? And talk to us a little bit of experience about growing up in Virginia and then, you know, Florida State with, you know, a lot of their tradition, especially in football, and that experience in your career path going the way it went.
Yeah, so what a lot of people don't know is my dad was in local television my whole life. So I grew up in a newsroom. He was kind of in the behind the camera stuff. So he was a director for a while and a promotions producer and all of these other behind the scenes roles. But I would go in when I was little, like I would go in and hang out with him. So I had been around that environment my whole life. And I loved it. I thought it was so cool and creative. And then playing softball, I did have that athletic. I was interested. My parents went to James Madison. And so, we weren't big college football people. We were NFL people. And so like my dad, born and raised a Dolphins fan. So I was a massive Miami Dolphins fan, and we had a giant cutout of Dan Marino in our living room. You know, that's what we did. So I grew up watching the NFL and loving the Dolphins and loving the Dodgers. And I just loved being able to watch those with my dad. And so when it was time to figure out what I wanted to do, I pretty much knew sophomore year of high school that like TV was a thing that we could do. Like I didn't know exactly what it looked like, but I had been in newsrooms. I had hung around people who were sports anchors and news anchors that I knew that was a job. You know, we didn't have school television stations yet. It was 2004, but that wasn't a thing. And so I knew that's what I wanted to do. And I also knew that I was not going to go north for college, and I wasn't going to stay in Virginia because I hate being cold. And so I was like, Florida sounds really great. What's down there? And started looking around, and my aunt had mentioned like, oh, my boss went to Florida State and he loved it. And we took a trip, and I remember going, all right, Mom, we're just going to go visit. Like, I'm going to apply. I had gotten in, like, let's just go visit. We're not going to make any decisions. And so we drove down to Tallahassee, which is a 12-hour drive from Richmond, and take a campus tour. And by the time I left, I had a student ID already. So it didn't take long to decide that that's where I wanted to be. And this is even funnier. This is like right when Facebook launched, right? And you had to have a college email to get onto Facebook. So I remember coming back to school, and I had one because I had registered for classes. I had a student ID now. And so like now I'm on Facebook, and all my friends were like, what is this? And I was like, I don't know, but I have a college email now, so we're going to figure it out. And so I'm over here on Facebook having no clue what to do. But I just remember being like, thinking I was like really cool because I had that, but it was fun. And then went down to Tallahassee, had never experienced a college football game environment like that. Like at the time, this is no knock to JMU, but that was not JMU football at the time. And even now, as good as JMU has been recently, it's still nothing like being at, Doak Campbell Stadium. And my very first game, my freshman year, was a night game between FSU and Miami. And they hadn't beaten Miami in 6 years. And they won that game 13-7. And I remember being like, oh my gosh, I'm obsessed. And ever since then, knowing I wanted to do TV and experiencing that for the first time, it was just like, this is incredible. And I loved every part of it. I mean, I was lucky enough to have Bobby Bowden still be the head coach at FSU at the time. Mike Martin was still the baseball coach, and then Leonard Hamilton was our basketball coach. And I think about that now, about how lucky I was that I got to experience those three men as head coaches. And as I got older and got into my major, we were always doing sporting events like, Razor Vision, I think is what they call it at Arkansas. And I saw Coach every day. I was working in the equipment room, and every Monday he would do his coach's show, and he would walk by and he'd walk back. He'd be like, hey, girl. And I was like, hey, Coach, how are you? And that was my Mondays during football season every single day when I was in school. And our classes were in the football stadium. If you've ever been to Florida State, it's this massive brick structure with a football stadium inside, but they're classes. So I had classrooms. That's where I spent junior and senior year at the football stadium, editing and doing all my classes there. So it was really cool to, looking back now and really not realizing it then, how fortunate I was to be around the people that I was in the sports world. And then obviously after that, really try to kind of tip my toe into TV and kind of took off from there. So it was fun.
Talk to us a little bit about Bobby Bowden.
Yes, man. I wish I had my phone and I can go grab it if you want. So there's a fun picture. I'm going to grab it. I know I'm going to roll off camera real fast. So I was lucky enough to be there all 4 years of his last 5. So I was in school from 2005 to 2009. And we were around all the time. And one of my really good friends still to this day, who was in my major with me, I was a media production major. And so we were doing a lot of the filming of the games and like student stuff. And he was a little older. He had been in the Army. So, he was almost like everyone's big brother at school because he had been, done that and then come back to school. And he was getting engaged. And his wife went to Maryland. And so he had planned to where he was going to propose to her at halftime during the FSU Maryland game, which also happened to be the final game of Mickey Andrews, like his final home game for Mickey Andrews.
And the people who don't know Mickey Andrews, he's one of the greatest defense coordinators of all time, was with Coach Bowden for
years.
Great
And
man.
So it was also his final game. And I'm going to try to talk and look at the same time. But we go down to the field and do all that. He gets engaged. Everyone's cheering, all of that stuff that you usually see after the game. We were taking pictures down on the field, and Coach was going to come out and talk to Zach and Marie and congratulate them and things. And so Coach comes out and he's joking around with us, and he's always talking and joking, and he just was so personable. And I mean, they had just gotten done playing a football game. I'm pretty sure they won that game, but again, it wasn't a great year. It was the second to last year at Florida State, and there was obviously a lot of, what's going to happen with Bobby's future. I'm pretty sure Christian Ponder was like a sophomore quarterback at that time. We had just gone through a whole stint of like, is Drew Weatherford the quarterback? Is Xavier Lee the quarterback? We really don't even know what's happening. And so they ended up making a bowl game. They went 6-6 that year, I believe. But obviously it was towards the end of his tenure. And so, but he's always talking, always great. And I had one of those old, like, digital cameras. iPhones weren't even a thing yet. That didn't exist. So Zach, I'm over here talking to Coach, and Zach's taking pictures. And then when he goes to say, look and smile, and we turn and smile, he takes the picture and he goes, oh, your camera just died. And I was like, are you serious? Like, I was so sad. And I was like, oh, no. And I was like, it's fine. So I go back afterwards, and I'm loading these SD cards, of the thing. And it's probably one of my favorite photos because it was candid. And everyone's got pictures with Bobby smiling and all these things. But because he was just taking pictures while we were talking before we were smiling, he was able to snap this photo. So that's Coach and I on the field before.
Wow.
Yeah, it's
awesome.
It's one of my favorite photos. Yeah. That is awesome. Yeah, he was great, and really sad, obviously, when he passed, but he was respected because of the man that he was, and not because of just the football coach that he was. And it was really cool to be able to have a little bit of that in my life and my career.
Wow. Right.
Well, and so after Florida State, obviously you kind of made that decision. This is what I'm going to do, be in TV.
Yeah.
What was next for your career?
So I went and I worked for a little bit at the station in Tallahassee. And then after that, went and took a job in Abilene, Texas. And if anyone's familiar with what Abilene looks like, it is West Texas. And I'm an East Coast girl, and I remember moving there, and I'm driving my car, my dad's driving the U-Haul, and we get past Dallas, and you get past Weatherford, and he's like, are you sure about this? And I'm like, keep driving. Just keep driving and call me. Are you sure about that? I mean, it is nothing out there. But it was really good for me. I'm a strong believer, especially in this industry, when you get out of college and you're figuring out yourself as a journalist, like, you got to go somewhere and suck for a while. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, you got to go somewhere and get your kinks out and, like, make mistakes and learn who you want to be and, like, go through that trial and error process in a market like Abilene that's very forgiving. They're used to seeing kids right out of college. They're a very forgiving market. It's hard to go to a Tulsa or something like that right out of school and cover that kind of stuff, heavy hitting stuff. And so it was really good for my career to be able to go out there and kind of learn what I wanted to do and cover some really good high school football. I mean, they wrote a book about football out there for a reason, right? Like Abilene was playing Odessa Permian and Midland and Amarillo, and we were going up to, you're driving 4 hours for conference games. And that was really cool to experience. It's a different level of passion that it's not the same as, like, Razorback passion. They're two very different things, but it was really cool to go out there for those 2 years and just experience what high school football is like in Texas and the crazy, crazy, crazy facilities that they play in. Like, those things are massive. It is insane. So that was really cool to be able to do that. I was ready to leave after 2 years, though. I was ready. It was a good 2 years. Again, relationships are a big part of it. Got to know some coaches, but I was ready to leave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you get the call to come to Fayetteville. Mm-hmm. And what was that like, pulling into Fayetteville? You mentioned fall in love with the place and obviously the people. But when you pulled in, was this something that this is it? Like, this is an incredible opportunity for me, or is this another stepping stone?
Yeah, at first it was a stepping stone. Now I remember I got flown up here. They don't do this anymore. They don't fly people up. Like, I was a little like
flown up.
I was about to be a number 3 in this. They were Aaron Peters and they had Trey Darren, Adam Moulter here as the weekend guys. Like, I was just going to be like a little reporter, but they flew me up here for my interview. And I remember landing at X&A and getting picked up. And I was like, it's green, I'm in. I'm like and they were like, hold on. Like, you haven't even talked to us yet. And I was like, no, I know, but I don't care. I was ready. But yeah, I moved here. I packed up a U-Haul. I drove the 10 hours from Abilene, and I pulled into my little triplex that I moved into kind of down by the baseball field. And Jason Carroll, who was our sports director at the time, him and Russell Shapp, who, if you're in our world, you know him, great photographer and one of Jason's really good friends, helped me unload my U-Haul. And then we went to Feltner Brothers, what used to be over here where Prelude was, and had a burger. So that was my first night in Fayetteville. And I just realized how cool it was. I think looking back, I definitely didn't understand the magnitude of it all, if that makes sense. Going to your first SEC media days, and it is overwhelming. And I didn't really know what it was like to cover a program like this exclusively with the passion and the responsibility that takes, you know? And so I was really naive. I think at first I'm just this young girl in her 20s, excited. Here I am. We're going to do, travel to these things. We're going to talk to these players. We're going to put stories. But I think you start to realize very quickly that I don't want to say you matter, but like what we did and the things we were doing were so much bigger than I ever anticipated it being. And I think that took me by surprise in a sense. And it was just like, wow, like I thought I was just taking a next job, and like, this is not just a job. And it was really cool. And I think that was the start of realizing that like we do something pretty special over here.
Yeah, there's no doubt that you do, and you did.
Thanks.
Definitely a huge impact, I'd say, on everything Razorback, but just the state and then in media in general. I mean,
yeah, thank you. It's been a fun ride, man. It's hard to encapsulate 12 years right into a sentence. Because roles changed, and we grew and we adapted, and platforms and social media and all of these things have kind of dictated how we have evolved over the years. But I always go back to the joy I had and the people I got to cover, right? Like I got to cover Bobby Portis, right? And we're all watching him now, obviously, in the pros. And one of the players that I got close to early was Alex Collins, and took that one kind of hard. We don't have to get into that, but Alex was great, and Alex was someone who let you in, right? And you built that relationship with him, and I even flew down to Florida during the NFL draft to cover him because, we thought he'd go, third round. And so we were down there. I was with Alex, but I was also with Denver Kirkland. So those two guys kind of going through the process together. And then Alex gets drafted by Seattle. But every time he was back here, and he was just awesome. And you just love to see him. And, there were guys on the basketball team and on the baseball team. I think Bobby Wernis is one of those guys where like he was on that 15 team and went to the College World Series, and you run into him and it's like, hey, how you doing? It's great to see you. Those are those kind of relationships with these players that I've covered over the years, because sometimes it's hard to remember that they're people too. And I'm sure that you understand what I'm saying. Like, they're just kids. They're just people, right? And these coaches are just people. And it's just about treating people with respect. And if you can earn that respect from them, and they know that, their best interest is my best interest. Like, I'm not here to slander or cause drama or anything like that. Like, you just build those relationships with those people, and then those people, pour that back into the relationship with you. It's just, I think that's what I'm going to miss the most and it's different. It's different now. I'm going to be honest. Like, I could probably walk by the basketball team and they don't know who I am. And that's fine. Things have adjusted. Things have changed. COVID changed a lot. But it was being able to see and build those relationships that I think are going to matter the most when I look back on the things that I did over the 12 years.
You talk about relationships and the fan base. Obviously, you built relationships with the fan base.
Yeah.
Being at Florida State and seeing how crazy, that even in basketball, Leonard did a great job down there, and you've been to different places. You talked about high school football in West Texas, and I've always thought Arkansas Razorback fan base is a very unique fan base. Talk about that coming into it, and was it eye opening or what? And then the relationships you've built with different fans over the years.
Yeah, I don't think I'd be fooling anybody if I didn't say this. But when you see the hog call for the first time, it's kind of terrifying. And it's just like, oh my God, like what in the world is this? And I remember thinking like, okay, this is different. Even in Florida, like I went to school, and it still blows my mind. I don't understand it. But I went to school with kids who were like, yeah, I go to Florida State, but I'm a Florida fan. Like, well, that doesn't make any sense. You're weird. Or I go to Florida State because like I want to be a blah, 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 but I'm a Miami Hurricane fan. I'm like, that, my brain can't compute that. That's whatever. But that's not a thing. Like, you are a Razorback fan here. There is no such thing as coming to Arkansas, but I'm a Missouri fan or something like you are an Arkansas fan, and these Arkansas fans love the passion. Even when things aren't going great, they're passionate about it, one way or the other. And that's a really cool thing to be involved in, and you start to realize that. You are supplying them with the coverage and the content that helps them feel more connected to the program, right? And like that's a big responsibility, and you have to do it the right way, and you have to make sure that you're doing it in a non-biased way to a fan base that is very biased, right? But I think the reason why I was able to earn respect again from people and fans was that they knew that I went to Florida State. I'm not from here, but I did my job the right way, and they respected that. And then we would build relationships and friendships based off of those things, and they knew that I can't, regardless. At the end of the day, I still cared about the success of the program, even though I was unbiased and just covering the program from a media standpoint. I'm not rooting for anybody to lose. I'm not rooting for anything to go wrong. And so that respect there was a big foundation of the respect that I had from the people and the viewers and the relationships that I built from a fan base. It's still weird to call the Hogs. I'm just going to tell you that right now. Like it's still a little weird. Cause I don't do it unless like, I'm emceeing an event or something like that. And like they do it. So, still going to be weird. I was at a softball game on Friday, and I put one of the beer hats on for the first time, and I was like, this is kind of weird. So, I loved though that passion. I loved, the beer hats. I loved seeing a stadium full calling the Hogs. I loved, I think Rick Namura, and they do it now with Vahiva Aloy and Nolan Souza, but the Hawaiian, the palm trees and the leis and all the Hawaiian skirts to like, when Tyler Spoon was playing, Ken Atkins carrying around that giant spoon. And I remember him getting into an argument with a security guard at Oklahoma State during the regionals because they wouldn't let his giant spoon in. And like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just like stuff like that are great memories to look back on. And again, great passionate fans that are really hard to come by.
Well, you've covered a lot of people, and you don't have to narrow it down. Well, we're going to make you narrow it down because we asked tough questions.
Deal.
What was, you've interviewed tons of people. What was the interview that you walked away from and went, wow, that was a good, like you wanted to have that interview, and it when you hit it and when you don't. What was the one that you walked away and said, "Well, that's a good one"?
Yeah. Sitting down one-on-one. Obviously those opportunities are rare. I think the one that I thought was the most impactful that I've ever had was, I believe it was year 3 for Sam. And I did a one-on-one. So it was 2002 heading into year 3. And they had just come off the win over Penn State in the what was the Outback Bowl. And the season was starting, and I got to sit down with Sam, and I think it might have been the most real conversation that I've had with a coach. Not that coaches are guarded, but coaches are guarded. No offense, guys. I get it. But we were able to have a conversation and talk, and he was open about, like, this is year 3. This is what I've learned, like, what does that logo on your chest mean? Like, how much weight does it carry? It wasn't just about the football. It was about Sam. And I walked away from that realizing that he was as authentic and real with me as I think he's ever been. And I remember being like, that mattered. Not that other ones didn't, but that one mattered. That one stuck out to me the most.
And he's a guy, Coach is a guy, I think that, everybody's guarded when you get in those situations, but he's open and honest. I mean, about everything. I mean, we've had him on our show and that part of it. Who is somebody you have not interviewed who you like? Bill Parcells would be my guy. If I could interview anybody,
sure.
That Last Supper or whatever you want to call it. Who's somebody that you have not interviewed that you would love to get a one-on-one with?
Dan Marino.
Dan Marino.
I would cry. I would do the interview. I would cry, and then I could die a happy person. I grew up with a 6-foot cutout of him in my living room beside a framed picture of Kirk Gibson with his arm up. I have, and I don't want to get too much into this, but I would just be in awe, I think, to just sit down and to be able to talk to him after I, fangirled in the corner for 5 seconds. Because I think everyone, even in the media, everyone's got someone they fangirl over. It doesn't matter who you are. I'm pretty sure Laura Rutledge probably fangirls over there's someone on her list too, right? But that would be it. I mean, I would be honored to just even 3 minutes, sit down with him for 3 minutes and just talk about what it's like to be Dan Marino. And to love the Dolphins probably as much as I do. So that would be my answer.
Wow. That's a good one. You mentioned earlier that things have changed since COVID, the journalism. And I was going to ask you about how things have changed since social media has kind of become such a big platform that everybody's on.
Yeah.
What is the biggest change to you that you've seen over the last, several years?
Yeah. Well, I think, social media definitely, I think Twitter launched in 2009. And I don't think anyone knew how to use it then, right? I was like, I don't even know what to do with this. So it's definitely adapted and evolved, and you've added Instagram and TikTok and, there was Vine there for a while, to the mix. And so your job is, so much more focused on not just putting together a sportscast, but also giving people content on their phones, because that's what they're on. I remember being in Abilene, and I developed a really good relationship with Hal Mummy, who was at McMurray at the time. And Hal's wonderful. We've been to a couple Jimmy Buffett concerts. He's great. And he calls me and he's like, hey, I'm going to leave McMurray, and I want you to come and sit down with me, and we're going to talk about it before I leave. So you get the exclusive interview. So we go over there at 2:00. We sit down with Hal and we talk about him leaving. And back then there was no real social media, digital. That really wasn't a thing yet. They were still trying to figure it out, even though it was, 2012. But it was like, you're holding on to this. You got breaking news, 5:00 news right off the bat, how Mommy to step down at McMurray. And we're going to beat the competition, but we're like keeping it in our back pocket. It's like 3:00. So we're sitting on this information for like 2 hours. You don't do that anymore. You're not breaking news at the top of the 5:00 newscast anymore. And so that's the biggest difference is we were sitting hoping, fingers crossed, that the station across the street didn't get some kind of wind that was going to happen. Nowadays, we have this. You want to obviously put things out there that are accurate and correct and verified. But obviously a sit-down interview saying I'm going to leave is from the horse's mouth itself. You would put that on social media first. You're not waiting for a 5:00 newscast. So that was kind of the biggest shift in thinking of how you put content out. And then I think you now then start to grow a responsibility of the kind of content you want to put out there. You obviously want to entertain people. That's what we're all here for. But making sure it's not at the expense of your integrity or ethics or the person that's involved. You want to be smart about what you're putting out there. You want to be engaging what you're putting out there. So there's a lot more thought process that goes into putting things on social media and on digital than just like clipping and sending. And so you kind of have evolved on what your strategy is on those platforms over the last couple of years. And then COVID hits. And I remember Tara and I were at the women's basketball tournament in Greenville, South Carolina, the week before the men. And obviously COVID shut down, the world shut down right in the middle of that week. I think Arkansas had like beaten Vandy, or they were about to play Vandy. And then it was like, no, everyone's got to leave, and everyone came back. And we were sitting in a table, and it was just like, what do we do? Like, sports doesn't exist right now. And a lot of credit to my managers and to people at the station that were like, sports still happens. Like, there are still stories here. Like, a baseball season just got canceled. A softball season just got canceled. A track season just got canceled. Basketball, I'm still bitter. I'll be real. I thought Florida State basketball was going to win a national title in 2020. I was really, really mad. Like, I thought that was Leonard's year. But there were still stories to tell. But everything shifted to Zoom. And Zoom interviews, I think what the universities and companies and things realize is that is really easy. It's a great way to connect people with other people. And it was a great way to do interviews and still fill content during COVID when people weren't leaving their houses. But I think if you were to look back now, because we do a lot on Zoom now, and it's more like hybrid. Some are hybrid. Sam's press conferences are in person or on Zoom, but then the players are just on Zoom. And you lose that relationship. These guys are just looking at a screen. You're not looking at me with a camera in your face and a microphone and like, you got to make eye contact with me and talk to me, right? These players aren't doing that. They're just looking at a screen. And it's so much harder to build relationships and trust when these guys are just looking at a computer screen, talking to, the Hollywood squares with people's faces in them. And so it's been different to build those relationships with some of these players and some of these coaches because you're now mostly behind a computer screen. And then it's a double-edged sword. Like, you have access whenever we want. We can do interviews whenever we want. We don't have to leave the office. It's great. All of those things are awesome. But you lose a little sense of connection, I think. And that's what I miss the most. I think if you were to come in now and it's all you've ever known, it's all you've ever known. But I really miss that connection of going over to the football facility or the basketball facility and doing interviews after practice 3 times a week. Like, I miss that sense. And it's been different in terms of, how the fans, I think, feel as well. It's interesting because I don't think that the fans feel as connected to these players and to these coaches as they used to too. And I think COVID had a lot to do with that because I think, it's just different when you're watching a Zoom interview. You're not watching a one-on-one. You're not watching a press conference. It's just a little different. And so now you've got a challenge of keeping the fans connected to these players. We don't need to get into NIL and transfer portal because that plays a big role into it too. But how do you get these guys to continue to feel connected, right? Like they love the university. They love the Razorback logo. They love to win, right? But when it comes to like who these guys are who are doing the winning and the losing and wearing that Razorback logo on their chest, like how do you feel towards them? And that's been the hardest thing, I think, right now for the industry and for sports in general, specifically for us who only cover the Razorbacks, is how can we continue to keep fans engaged and care about these guys? Because they're still kids, right? But they don't feel that connected. Like how do you bridge that gap a little bit more and a little bit better? That's been kind of the biggest change and the biggest difference with how things have operated.
Well, that is interesting with the Zoom part of it and the personal.
Never thought about that.
Yeah,
It makes sense. It makes a lot of sense.
It does make a lot of sense. Well, you covered Arkansas sports for over a decade. Give us that one wow moment. Us beating Texas, people rush the field. The Razorbacks beating Auburn, number one, rushing that. I mean, there's a lot of different scenarios. You've seen the good, bad, and ugly. It could be good. It could be bad. What was one of those wow that just happened moments?
Oh, guys, I'll give you a bad one first. And my apologies to Dave. I was in TD Ameritrade in 2018 when that ball landed between Jared Gates and Carson Shaddy and Eric Cole. And I was shaking. I was shaking in the stands because Jason, our boss at the time, this is my Jason interpretation. Jason, go out there, shoot with your phone. I was like, okay. So I'm in the stands and I'm shooting. I'm like shaking because they're about to win. And then that happens, and I don't have to get into it. And I still think about that moment. That was, if you were there in that stadium, you're not going to forget how that felt. You're not going to forget how that felt, even though it was horrible. As a Razorback fan, you're not going to forget how that felt. In terms of highs, there's a lot. I mean, Texas was really, really cool when they beat Texas and they rushed the football field because I hadn't experienced that at all. And that was exhilarating. And you just were so happy for that team. And that was really, really cool. And yeah, I think that might be the top. Auburn was cool. I was in Bud Walton for Auburn, but the one thing, it's crazy. I think it wasn't the rushing the court for me at Auburn, and the feeling. It was what I remember the most about that game was I had been doing live shots. I think that game started at 6:00, and I had been doing live shots in the museum, talking about hosting number one and all of those things. It's a whiteout. All of these things are happening. And so I don't actually walk into the arena until about 6:15 because I'd been outside. You go down the elevator and you walk through that tunnel that the Gucci Row people walk down and the visiting team walks through to get to their locker room. I walked down that tunnel and the I don't know, it was like a wave of just like, oh my, it was hot. It was it was like a stifling wave of like, oh my God. It was an incredible, like it almost like hit me in the face. The amount of people, the atmosphere, the yelling, the screaming. I had never experienced anything like that in my life. And the minute I walked out that tunnel, it just hit me in my chest. It was just like, oh, this is different. This is different. And obviously they ended up winning that game. But I remember that feeling more than I remember, or, better than I remember, them winning and them rushing the court and all of that stuff. That feeling was something I've never forgotten.
It was an intense night that day. I guarantee you, I was
no doubt.
there. It was very intense.
Yeah.
All right, Ray.
So we've gone through your career. We've told some pretty incredible stories, some unbelievable moments. What's next?
Yeah, that's a great question. I told you guys this before we started recording. When I went to Florida State for college, I had a lot of people say, why are you going so far away? Why are you going to Florida? And I said, I'm going to go. And I know that if I don't like it, I can always come back. I never came back, but I always knew that was an option. And so I have that same mentality with this. I think it's time for me to take a step away. I've been doing it total for 16 years. I'm doing it here for 12. If I don't like it, I can always come back. But right now, my son is 7 and my daughter is 3. And they need their mom right now. And mom's gotten to do some really cool stuff. Mom has gotten to travel to every place except for South Carolina in the SEC. I haven't been to South Carolina. It's the one place I hadn't been. I've covered 2 Super Bowls. I covered the Super Bowl in Houston, and I covered the Super Bowl in Minneapolis. I covered the Olympics in Paris over the summer. I've done a lot of cool stuff. They've seen mommy do a lot of cool things. But I can't get that time back. And they're young, and I miss them a lot. And there's some other stuff in my life going on right now where my kids need me more than that job needs me, and Pig Trail is going to be okay. I took over when Jason left, and my whole goal was to maintain the level of excellence and execution and professionalism that he spent 13 years building. And I wanted to take it over. I wanted to maintain it, but also grow it and push it forward. And now I'm hoping that whoever takes it over can go and say, I want to continue to maintain that excellence and that level of execution and professionalism that Alyssa did, that Jason did before her, while also then taking it to whatever that next level looks like. And I have full faith that whoever takes over for the department is going to do that. I think it's been left in a really good spot to be able to do it. It's now time for me to do something else. And I don't know what that means. I don't know what that looks like. My son, when I had to tell him that I had decided to step away and not work at the TV station anymore, he said he wants me to go work at a donut shop. So you might catch me at a donut shop. Yeah, just, spending more time with them. Mm-hmm. And I don't get much of that. And I want to take advantage of the time that I do have. And again, I can always come back if I miss it that much. Or, I'm not going to lie to you guys. I haven't been to a Florida State football game since I left in Tallahassee. I went to the national championship game in 2013. That was worth it. But I haven't been back to Tallahassee for a football game, right? Like, I haven't gotten to take my son and show him where mommy went to school, and this is what these things are. And like, don't hold that against me, but like, that's on the things that I would like to do. I would like to take him to experience what it's like to go to Florida State and show him that. And I haven't done it. So I want to do that. I want to do a little bit more traveling. That's not just to these beautiful SEC college campuses around the South. I want to take some time to do some of those things. But I will say that I'm not done telling stories, and I think that's another thing too, is that as this industry has evolved, I think my priorities have evolved too. It's fun to be on TV. I think everyone will tell you that. But like, it doesn't drive. Like, you shouldn't be in this just to be on television. And I think over the years, that's the least most important part of my job to me. I want to tell stories. I want to put together glimpses of people's lives for others to watch, to enjoy, to provoke any kind of emotion. I had no idea what spending a week at Whitehall covering Ryan Mallett in his first season at Whitehall as a head coach, now what that meant, right? Like in my head, I was just like, Ryan Mallett's about to be a head coach at a high school level for the very first time. His dad was a head coach. This is a hell of a story. And he welcomed me into that program for 4 days. We mic'd him up. We mic'd his players up. We went around the town. We talked to people. We experienced what life was going to be like as Ryan Mallett as the head coach at Whitehall. And now it's crazy that what that represents now, obviously, with his passing. When I was doing it, I just was doing it to share that story. And it's things like that. Like, I want to be able to tell those kinds of stories. And we put together stories on Lance Harder when he retired and everything he did for the women's track team. And when Texas joined the SEC, I was part of a project and helped oversee a project of like the history between Arkansas and Texas and like putting those things together. That's where I think I've found some renewed passion. So I'm not done telling stories yet. I might not be on TV, and that is okay. But I'm really not done telling stories yet. I want to find an avenue some way, somehow to keep that going, whatever that means. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sounds like an exciting next chapter.
I hope so. Yeah, I hope so. I don't know what that looks like. I also complete 180, but I'm also like obsessed with board games, and I have this grand idea to like open up a board game cafe. So
yeah.
maybe I'll do that too. Here in Fayetteville.
Yeah,
why
right.
not? So I have a whole bunch of ideas. I have a whole bunch of things that I can do. And you know what? I say all this, and a year from now or something, 2 years from now, you might see me back in the media because I missed it and I decided to come back. But for now, we're going to figure it out. And I hope that the storytelling continues to be a part of my story.
I believe it will. I'm sure.
Thank you.
Everybody's got a story, and you've told a lot of them,
Yeah.
and that's what it's all about. Well, we'll get you out of here. We appreciate you
This
coming
is great.
on,
No, you
man.
guys have been awesome. Thank you for letting me talk about myself. I don't do
Well,
that
that's
often.
what people, that's what people want to
do
hear
it
and everything.
often.
I think Bray's got something here for
yes.
you a little bit.
Oh, okay.
We have our All-American Steakhouse $100 gift card.
This place is awesome.
Oh,
It is
It's so
fantastic.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love going over there. Thank you guys.
This
Thank
is-
you.
She knows about the crab dip then. We
Oh,
don't need to plug
yeah,
it.
yeah,
She
crab
knows-
dip
yeah.
all the
Okay.
way, crab dip all the way and everything.
All right. Well, thanks for dinner, guys. I appreciate it.
Well, we appreciate you coming on, and
Yeah.
you've been a big part of the media over the last 20 years, and a lot of all Razorback sports, and you've kind of been the face, and you're getting out of it where you're going to be missed. But if you want to come back, we'll want you back on, and all the work and all the stories you've told. You've done an outstanding job, and you'll be missed, but. I know you'll keep an eye on those Razorbacks also.
I will.
And
You'll see me in the stands now. It'll be weird having to buy a ticket and not have a press pass to get in. I'm going to have to get used to that.
Exactly. Well, you take your son to Florida State. There's Arkansas connection there with Mike Norvell and Gus
Yes.
Malzahn down there.
Yeah.
Now you
How
gotta
about
check
that?
Yeah.
Y'all, we could go on another hour
Yeah.
about,
Yeah.
about all of that. So,
How do you feel about that?
Yeah.
Is that, that's,
you know what? I like Mike.
Yeah.
I do like Mike. When he hired Gus, I was like, oh gosh. But were you here when Derek Satterfield was a SID? So
Yeah.
he is Mike Norvell's SID
Oh,
at
is he
FSU.
really?
How about talk about Arkansas connection?
Oh, that's
so
wild. Yeah.
Maybe I'll just call Derek and see if he can
Yeah.
get me in.
yes.
Yeah.
Huh. That is
Yeah.
a wild.
Probably hook
Arkansas
you up,
connection.
right?
Yeah.
Probably hook you up. Well, like I said, we appreciate you coming on
Yeah.
and taking time. Love listening to your story. And
Thank you.
And it gives our audience in-depth looks behind the scenes. And like I said, thank you for taking time for coming on. Well, for Coach Jeff Williams and Coach Bray Cook, we'll see you next time.